Alright, so the first thing we're going to do, we have our soldering iron plugged in right here. We have the cables out of the way and whatnot. I'm going to set it to about right there, which normally works, and we're going to go ahead and turn the thing on and let it heat up. So we're going to let our soldering iron just sit there and bake for about 15-20 minutes. And let's go ahead and prep this system like we would be doing something. Alright, now as you can see, we have our system right here, and what I want to do first off to demonstrate this to you all, I'm just going to be soldering, a few components. I'll probably solder, right here, and I'll solder these points here. Now, what you want to do first off, I already doused this with some rubbing alcohol. You just want to go in, and you just want to make sure all the components that you're going to hit and anything next to them are clean and whatnot. I'm also going to say this in advance, if I can do this on camera, you can do this as well. I'm actually going to explain this a bit, but on camera, when you do soldering on camera, it's probably, honestly, I want to say, like, at least 2 or 3 times harder than it is doing it on your own. Just due to the fact that not really the pressure of you being on camera, although that might affect some people, it doesn't really affect me that much. It's more the fact that I have this intrusive presence on me. And, if I'm soldering, like if I'm doing this, like for example, like if I'm soldering like this, you guys can't see what I'm doing. So I gotta, change up things and start soldering here. But then I gotta worry about, hey, what's going on? What about my shadow? Is that covering it too much? Things like that. So soldering on camera is about 2 or 3 times harder than just soldering alone. Just keep that in mind. But I'm gonna try and keep it easy for you all. So we're just gonna go ahead and solder up some of these points as well. Also, while we're waiting for the soldering iron to heat up and whatnot, I do want to say, I don't know if it can really get captured, but my hands, actually, as you can see, my hands do shake a little bit, and that really diverted me as well a lot from soldering too. Like, I was just like, oh, I just can't solder, my hands, look at my hands, they just shake. I don't have Parkinson's, I don't have anything like that, it's just for some reason I can't keep my hands still, and this is a good day, honestly. But because of that, a friend of mine actually joked around before, and he was saying, what you could do, because he had seen my work, and he saw that I did some decent work, and he was saying, what you could do, maybe I'm just bringing the iron over here, he was saying, maybe you could, like, kind of time your shakes, and sometimes, I would say this, as funny as this sounds, you might have to do that sometimes. If you have shaky hands, you might just have to go in and, like, when you see yourself shaking, just like kind of time it, heat up everything, and then back off a little bit. So timing your shakes, that's one thing that I could recommend. And one of my buddies, he told me about that. I was like, you know what, that is something I do, because as you can see, if I get close in there, I'm kind of shaking a bit. I can't keep it steady. So a steady hand really helps, I'll say that. But most of soldering is also confidence, and eyesight is good too. But if you're confident with your stuff and you know how to handle it, and as I said, you can kind of time your shakes and whatnot. And once your thing is stable on there, it's stable. You're good. You're pretty much good. And I think this soldering iron's about ready, actually, so let's go ahead and start soldering. Alright, now, one thing first off that you might want to do to make sure that your soldering iron is ready, just go ahead, take it, and you just want to melt some solder on it. And if it melts like that, oh, see, that's really nice. Alright. If it melts like that, no issues and such, and that's smoking a lot, just don't worry, it smokes. You can go ahead and clean that off, and that means your soldering iron is good to go. So at this point, actually, I can just go ahead and turn down my soldering iron, which I'm doing right now. And we're going to go ahead and start soldering onto these points. But first off, what we want to do is we want to tin these and such. And tinning them, that means you just put some solder balls on these little points right here, which, as I said, is what we're going to do. So first off, you just want to take some of this nasty stuff right here, the flux, and just put it on the points like you're putting some jelly on your sandwich. Alright. Beautiful. It's supposed to look nasty. Alright, alright. Now that we have that, really all you need to do, there's multiple things you can do, and I kind of do a mix of the two. First off, some people, what you can do, you can put your solder on here, make sure it's all melted, and then you can kind of transfer it over to the point so it tins that way. Or you could heat up the pad itself that you're soldering and then put the solder on there. And it really depends, like these ones are a bit bigger, so we're able to do that on them, but other ones you can't. So as you can see, it smokes up a whole bunch. That's normal, as I said, but I'm gonna go ahead, put some on here and kind of transfer it over. So I'm gonna put that on. And sometimes, it really all depends on what you're doing. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, hey, you know what? Don't sweat it. As you can see, bam, right there. And that's actually a bigger solder ball than what we really need. But all you really need to do is go in, and we're just going to tin a few of these random ones right here. And some of them, it really depends on here, especially with Xboxes and whatnot. But some points are a lot harder to tin than others. And other times, if you're having some difficulty and such, and especially if you don't want anything, you know, messing up and whatnot, or anything shorting, just go ahead and frequently clean your soldering iron tip as well too. So I'll also actually try and get the camera in closer a little bit. The reason why I backed it off is just due to the fact that I don't want the camera freaking tipping over while I'm doing all of this. Alright, now one thing I also want to say while we're doing this as well is that you really need patience. Just don't get mad while you're doing this or anything, because, I mean, I'll put it like this. If you get mad while you're soldering something and you break it, so what? Like, and that sounds odd, but it's just like, listen. If you're trying to solder something that's not working and you're just getting pissed off and then you break it, you're going to be more pissed off. So why did you do it in the first place? Because now if it didn't work before, it's definitely not going to work now. So just save yourself the trouble. Don't get mad. Just be happy that you know how to solder and whatnot. But anyways, I'm actually... Let's see, I might have to turn up the soldering iron a little bit more, just due to the fact that it doesn't seem to want to solder now. So, you know what, that happens too, and if that works, if that happens, that's fine. And actually, I'm kind of glad I got that on camera too, because maybe it'll make you guys feel a little bit better that, you know, even I make mistakes once in a while and such on stuff like this. But also, you really need to find your proper settings, your proper grounding, anything like that. Just find your comfort point overall when you're soldering and whatnot. Alright, and now that we have it heated up a tad bit more, we're able to get some stuff soldered. So you know what, let's go ahead and do another solder ball right here. So we're just going to get this nice and hot. Then melt the solder in right there. And you see, sometimes it wants to transfer over and sometimes it's really stubborn. Like this point right here, it seems to be one of those points that just does not like solder for some reason. But you can just keep trying at it and trying. And as you can see, bam, there we go. We got some solder right there. So we got one solder ball there, one solder ball there, another solder ball right there. You know what, let's go ahead and move on to another point area. I want to do some of the points right here. So let's go ahead and put the soldering iron up. We're going to go ahead and have to clean it first. Let's go ahead and put the soldering iron up, and we're just going to go ahead, and I cleaned this up already, but let's flux these points again too. So we need a bit more jelly on here, but just seriously, I mean, you can be really flexible with the flux and all that. Just get it all on there and whatnot. So it's kind of on there, it kind of isn't. We have a decent amount of it on there. So it seems to be fluxed up a decent amount. Now all we really need to do, let's go ahead and tin a few more of the points right here. So we're going to go ahead and take this point, heat up the pad. And you just want to heat up the tip of the soldering iron really, and then you can just kind of keep adding to it. And there, we got a nice beautiful solder ball on the motherboard right there. Let's go ahead and do it again right next to it. Feeling like Bob Ross right here. Anyways, just go ahead and put it there. Once you got the pad all nice and warmed up, just gonna go ahead, touch up the pad. There we go, beautiful. Got another solder ball. And now, sometimes the solder balls might be kind of gray, other times they'll be shiny. If they're shiny, that's good, but if they're gray, I really don't have much of an issue with that. Like, see, I just added some more to that, and that just becomes shiny. Like, you could just add a little bit more, and it's all nice and shiny and whatnot. So I'm just trying to see how well you guys get that. I think you guys get a decent amount there. But we got two solder balls right there. Easy. Now that we've got some tinning down and whatnot, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and tin a little bit more, just to show you all this stuff. So we get some nice good tinning practice in here. Again, really what I'm doing, for this at least, I found out the best technique on here right now, at least for myself, is I like to heat up the actual, you know, pad itself. And then what I do is I kind of, you know, touch the solder to the pad and the tip of the soldering iron all at the same time, like so. And then it transitions over to the motherboard itself. And it seems to be working fine. Now there's other times where if you're doing, for example, if you have to mod something on the eject button, so to speak, you have to touch up, or you have to tin a really, really tiny resistor. What you really need to do for that is you need to just put some solder on the soldering iron and then just like tin it and then go back. Like that's really what you need to do. And that way, you know, if you just like tap it like that or something, you should be able to solder on there. But let's go ahead and let's do one more point on here. I want to do that. So we're going to do another point. Let's do this one in the corner. That looks like a good one. So again, we're just going to heat this up and tin. And we want more on there. All right. You know what? I think we could do with a little bit more. I don't want to see any copper on there. Let's have all that. Beautiful. There we go. All right. So now we have, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 solder balls to work with. That should be more than enough for this. Especially since I'm really not doing anything. I'm just soldering wires from one point to another. But I mean, those are all beautiful joints that would make Bob Marley get jealous of me. So I think we're good on that. Anyways, let's see. Alright, so first off, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take just this right here, and I'm just going to go ahead and solder it into this point. So what we need to do for this, we need to kind of just put this right here, put the wire on top of this point, but then heat up the actual solder. So I'm going to do this. Now, as you can see, the solder is wet and whatnot. Well, it's liquidy. You can just go ahead and solder in and let go. And I can actually feel just the hotness running through the wire right now. But as you can see, we can give it a nice little tug. It's not going anywhere. Huh. We got that. So let's go ahead and, you know what, we could even desolder this, let's say. Let's desolder that, pull it out, there we go. As you can see, we just pulled it out with no issues. Let's solder it into the corner right here. Again, I'm just going to show you all. You heat up the solder first. As the solder is nice and liquidy, you take this, you form a bond with it, and then you let go. So we're soldering in. Going to solder that, let go, and it seems to be fine on there. Again, we got another good joint. Anyways, we got all that. Now let's go ahead, let's pretend that I'm doing a type of exploit of some kind that requires me to go from this point to this point right here. Now let's go ahead and clean off the soldering iron again. And we're going to go ahead, let's hit this point right here. So I hope y'all can see that. It looks like, I'll move that back a little bit. There we go. So we're just going to go ahead, and I want to solder, let's see, kind of trying to stretch a little bit. There. I think that should be good. Ow, I just burned myself a little bit, but I think that should be fine. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of take this, and I'm having some difficulty twisting this actually, but I think this should be okay. And as you can see, I'm actually shaking right here. This isn't even me nervous, it's just me holding a soldering iron and shaking, but, time your shakes, time your shakes. Let's go ahead, heat this up. Once we got that heated up, there we go in. Get some liquid on there and whatnot. Alright. And actually, you know what, I think I took off a decent amount of the solder that was there. So, let's go ahead. You know what, we kind of have it there, but let's go ahead and redo that joint. That should be fine. Again, as I said, I don't mind if I show you mistakes on here because these are just things that I can pass on to you all. So we're just going to fix that up with a bit more solder. There, got a nice little solder ball right there. We're going to go ahead, make sure I get this all on frame. There we go. You can just go ahead, take this, and touch it up. Come on, melt, 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 melt. There we go. And actually, I'm not even getting it 100%. There we go. And that looks like it should be fine, honestly. It's a little bit crooked, but you know what? The exploit will work just fine if need be. So, as you can see, I'm kind of giving it a few light tugs. That thing's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere, you guys. Those are bonded for life. But let's go ahead and pull out, well, I'll go ahead and keep them in for now. I don't see an issue with that. Let's go ahead and do some other wires right here again. I'll go ahead and, you know what, let me get some smaller wires for this. Alright, I'm going to solder these two really small points together. So with this, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and go in. And how would I accomplish this actually? I think I'll go ahead there. I think this would work. I just have this little red wire that I can use. Don't cut the red wire! Anyways, let's go ahead, take this, I'm going to straighten this out, and we're going to just go ahead, heat up our solder that's already on there and existing, and let go, and the solder, oh, looks like it's soldered in. I'm kind of missing the point on here because I'm doing this, I'm looking at everything at an odd angle, as you all can see. And this is the problem, as I said, with soldering on camera. It's a lot harder than just soldering alone. Alright, you know what, that actually looks fine. That should be okay. And let's go ahead and solder this right here into the side. So let's go ahead, we're just going to get this. Alright, heat up the solder. Now that we have the solder heated up, just go into the middle right there. I think that should be, nah, we didn't get that. Again, if you don't get it, just don't sweat it. As you can see, it looks like we're kind of having the same issue that we had earlier, where it's just a little hard to get the bond on there. So if we're having issues with the bond, again, as you can see right there, that's really nothing that a little solder can't fix. So we're just going to go ahead, take some more solder, just pop it on there. I think that should be alright. I have a little bit of solder on the tip of my soldering iron as well. But we can just go ahead, take this, solder it in. And now that actually went in a lot easier. Beautiful. So really, what have we learned here, boys and girls? Well, maybe it doesn't work all the time, as you can see. Let's go ahead, get this soldered. There. And actually, that is a lot better. There we go. So, boys and girls, what have we learned? First off, sometimes you might need more solder than you thought. And second, if there's not enough solder on there, put more solder on there. And third, you can be confident, but don't be cocky with stuff. I hope I wasn't really cocky there, but some people just like to think, oh, you know, I could solder real well. All I did was solder some wires in high school, and I'm good at this. Like, if you soldered wires, no, you're not going to be too good at this. But you know what? We got those two down, so I think we should be good on that. But let's go ahead, just desolder them for now, because as I still partially use this system, I really don't want them in there. Because I don't know if they do anything, but at the same time, I really don't know if they do anything. So I want to go ahead, desolder them real quick. Alright, there we go. Just got those two out in like 15 seconds maybe. Pulling things out when desoldering is a lot easier. So we got those, but as you can see, we just soldered those points and everything was good. Let's go ahead and try a small resistor as well. Alright, so let's do something a lot smaller. I want to solder onto this resistor right here. And honestly, this isn't even the hardest thing I can do. But you know what? Just so I don't intimidate anyone on here, we're just going to go ahead do the tip of this one. So again, we just clean it up and then we flux everything here. Once everything looks good and fluxed, yeah, that looks good enough. Go ahead, put it to the side here. And this is really, I just want to say, this is not for, you know, advanced people. There might be people who are looking at this, they're like, oh my god, this stuff you're doing is so easy, you suck at soldering. No, this is for beginners. This is for people wanting to get into it as a hobby, you know, do some beginner things and whatnot. So we're going to go ahead. Now, this is what I wanted to show you, where it kind of just like bunt it a little bit almost. What you want to do is you just want to here, we're going to be tinning this right here. You kind of want to put a decent amount of solder on, and then put it on there. And as you can see, we actually have it tinned already from what I see. So you really don't need that much solder. And we can go ahead and hit the other ones right here. Even if you want to, you can kind of go in with your tip and just pop it on. But you really don't need too much solder to tin it and whatnot. go ahead tin that thing too. So I'm actually not 100% sure if that one got tinned, but we can just check real quick if needed. So again, I'm just gonna pick that up, put a little bit of solder on there. Actually looks like it's tinned. Good. The reason why I'm doing these really small points is due to the fact that this is stuff that normally I have to do anyways, so we're gonna go ahead and hit those. Alright, now I'm just gonna kind of go in and tin these other little points as well, and really what I'm doing is I'm kind of just almost doing the same thing really, but you want to do more of a transfer of solder and such between everything. And once you have it all, you can kind of tell what has been tinned and what hasn't, because the ones that have been tinned are kind of shinier compared to others. But I really don't have any wires on hand actually that would bond well to these little tiny resistors. But kind of what you're wanting to do, you almost, once you have that on there, I just globbed solder on this, even though that's not the best idea, but you kind of just want to hit that real quick. And once it's melted, just kind of get the wire on that you're working with, and it would stay on. With this demonstration, this doesn't work super well, due to the fact that, honestly, I mean, this little wire, this cable that I'm using, is not, as you can see, it's not even bonding properly on there, but that's just because there is not enough space for it to actually get soldered on. So for this demonstration, it's not going to work out too well, but I'm just showing you how to like tin these little points right here and such, just things like that. But let me go over to the other side of the motherboard and I'll show you how to do that as well too. Alright, now as you can see right here on this side of the board as well, I've already fluxed up everything here, but we're going to tin some of these little tiny resistors as well. To give you an example of how small these are, there you go. That's what we're about to deal with. But let's go ahead, you really have to do the same thing, but except it's more transferring. So just put some solder on, put it on one of those. Beautiful. See, it smoked up a little bit. It's kind of shiny right there. That means it's soldered on successfully, so no real issue with that. I experimented with these a little bit, but you can just take a little bit of solder again, put that on there, put it on the sides and whatnot, and bam, like all those little points are being tinned. And if you have a little tiny wire, you could go ahead and solder it to there, and you should be good. Now that I'm about to wrap up this tutorial, I want to show you all something. When you're putting your soldering iron away and whatnot, this is what you want to do. First, turn it off, and while it is cooling down, like right after you turn it off, I like to just glob on a whole mess of solder on the top of the tip. So as you can see, it's all smoky and all nice there. And then just start cleaning it. Once you have it cleaned, you should be good to go. It should be all shiny and everything, and you could put your soldering iron over to the side, and you should be good to go. After it cools down, just don't touch it for about 20 minutes, I want to say, and wrap your soldering iron up, well, your solder up here. Now, one thing I want to show on here, there's two things I want to talk about. One, challenge yourself. The reason why I showed you these little points right here is because that might be stuff that you have to do, and if you can solder, like if you could solder those and get your confidence up and feel really good about them and whatnot, that will really help you out. Challenge yourself. But because of that, that is why I also said get a bad board, get a dead motherboard of some kind, because another thing you want to do is if you mess up any of that stuff, you're not going to feel too bad about it. But one thing I really recommend doing as well is even breaking some stuff on the board if you don't care about it. Now that's why I said at the beginning of this video, I haven't broken anything on accident. I say that, I say do it on purpose, because with your soldering iron right here, this is a little, little powerful weapon tool that you have at your disposal here. And because of that, it's your little tool of destruction. Now, you can do a lot of good things with the soldering iron, but you could mess up as well. And the reason why I say break stuff on purpose is because you really need to know at what point can you solder, at what point can you do what, until something breaks. So for example, if I'm working on this resistor right here, how much pressure do I need to put on there to break it? Like what degree might not work and such, just things like that. How much solder can I put onto a resistor until it floods off the motherboard? Just things like that. Those are things that I really recommend doing. And you might be thinking that I'm crazy, but just hear me out, I did it before, as I said, especially I actually did it with this soldering iron. So I could learn how to use this one compared to my Radio Shack one. I was getting used to the temperatures, I was getting used to things like that. I would change up the temperature, change down the temperature, find what temperatures were right, and find what temperatures, you know, would cause things to start breaking and whatnot. Now I've got it about even to the point where I want it, and it works fine. But you know, I did break things on motherboards on purpose just to see at what point of stress can this motherboard take using the soldering iron at this point. So it's things like that that I would recommend doing. Odd things, I know, but really, I mean, I'm being serious. Just try and break things on purpose. Anyways, this is Mr. Mario signing off. Thank you for watching, everyone. Thank you for watching this very, very long video, and I really hope I helped out some people. If you have any other questions, go ahead and let me know, but I hope this really, you know, helped you all out with anyone wanting to get into soldering, wanting to get into, you know, the wonderful world of soldering, and not really sure where to start or what to do. But anyways, this is Mr. Mario signing off. Thank you for watching, everyone. For real this time.